Hello and welcome to another Java tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to continue our discussion on creating a LaTeX renderer class in Java. And we said that the base idea is that any LaTeX renderer should have a typesetter argument that specifies the name of the LaTeX typesetter that we're going to call and feed the text file to it. And also the number of runs can be an option. And what do we mean by that? What we mean with the number of runs is that sometimes we need to call the typesetter, for example, PDF LaTeX, on the text file more than one time. And that's because when we create a text file, there is no auxiliary file. And when the LaTeX, for example, PDF LaTeX, goes through the text file for the first time, it creates an auxiliary file, and inside that auxiliary file it takes a note of what needs to be done in your article, right, or in your document, what kind of stuff LaTeX needs to do to create your PDF file. And sometimes there are some stuff, for example, citations, references, creating table of contents that they are, so LaTeX takes a note of them in the auxiliary file. But in the first run, LaTeX doesn't do anything. So the very first run that you run the PDF LaTeX on your text file, the job of the PDF LaTeX is to just create a note, or basically create the auxiliary file of what needs to be done. And in the second run, it goes through the auxiliary file. It doesn't go through the text file again, because if the auxiliary file has already been generated, it just goes through the auxiliary file and starts from the first line to the end and executes all the notes that it has made. Now I want to show you a quick example so that you really understand what this means and what's the meaning of the auxiliary file. So let's head to Eclipse, and in LaTeX tutorials I'm going to create a new folder, tutorial_5. And let's create a plain text file. So tutorial5.tex, right? And I'm going to just drag and drop it in my editor. Let's again, the very first line is always we tell the LaTeX what document template or document class we're going to use. Let's say a typical article. Let's set the default font size to 12 pt. And then I'm not going to use any package here, but I'm going to immediately start my document environment to start adding text. And any environment starts with begin and ends with n and the name of document. And here I'm going to start with some text. So this is an example of why we need to run PDF LaTeX twice instead of once. Look at this equation, and I'm going to create an equation in the display mode. If you put the equation inside the equation environment, LaTeX interprets it as a display mode equation. And again, the same idea is always applies in LaTeX. You put the equation inside the equation environment, you put your document inside the document environment. And now this is the reason why we are going to need to call the PDF LaTeX twice. I'm going to add a label, equation1, right? You can add labels to any environment that you have. And then later on, when you want to reference this environment, you can use a command that takes this label, whatever you put here, and then LaTeX automatically figures out the right numbering format. For example, equations are typically numbered, and if you want to reference them, you usually reference them with numbers, right? So let's say we just say beta equals zeta minus 2, all right? And now here's the thing. Let's say as you see in equation, I want to reference this, and the way we reference an environment is with the label that we put inside that environment. So, and the command is ref. And it's a LaTeX command, which means it can take options, square brackets, and arguments. In this case, it only takes one argument, and it doesn't take any options, so I'm not going to add the square bracket. And what is the argument? The argument is any label inside your text file. So here, equation1. And this is the power of LaTeX compared to Microsoft Word, for example. With this, you can label any environment that you have. for example, and then you can reference them anywhere in your document, and LaTeX automatically figures out what's the numbering. So later on, if I add for example, I have one equation here, so this becomes equation number 1, and LaTeX creates equation number 1. It puts 1 here. If I add an equation later on before this, then this equation that I'm referencing becomes equation number 2, and then LaTeX automatically changes this number in the PDF file to 2 instead of 1. So LaTeX takes care of everything for you. But then here's so as you see in equation 1, let's write something. The variable is blah blah blah. All right, so let's save this, and I'm going to open up a terminal here. All right, so let's feed this text file to our PDF LaTeX tutorial 5, and let's see what happens here. It's very interesting to see what LaTeX is telling us. LaTeX says, okay, this is PDF LaTeX, etc., and I found this text file. So LaTeX first checks if this file is exists in your working directory. So I'm launching the PDF LaTeX from that tutorial 5 folder. So it says, okay, I can find it, no problem. I'm running LaTeX 2E, patch level 4, L3 programming layer, that's fine. And the very first line of the text file is the document class. So LaTeX first tries to see if it can find a file, a class file. Again, a class is like a template. A class file is a template for the type of document, and we're using article, which is one of the built-in types. And LaTeX says, okay, I was able to find this class or template document that you're specifying article, and it's article CLS, and it was inside this text LaTeX base, right? So we're using one of the predefined classes or article types or article templates. And obviously you can say that, imagine that anyone can create any class file, and that's what actually most of the scientific journals do. They create their own style class file, and you download it from their website, and then you tell LaTeX, okay, go and find this class file, use this template. So LaTeX says, okay, the first line of your basically the first line of your text file is successful. I was able to find this template, and no problem, let's proceed. So the document class is article, and this is the last time this article class was modified, a standard LaTeX document class, so no problem here. And then size 12.clo, and this is the option here, the baseline 12, and it was able to track this. Again, there is another file that tells LaTeX how to handle this option. And then PDF LaTeX def, it says, okay, you're running PDF LaTeX, no problem, I know what kind of typesetter it is. And now here's the very first interesting thing. So inside our folder in the beginning, there was only this tutorial5.tex, right? So there was no auxiliary file, and LaTeX is telling us that I wasn't able to find an auxiliary file, so I'm going to go ahead and create one for you. But then it says that I took a note of that there is a reference here, and it gives us a warning, reference equation 1 on page 1, undefined on input line 13. What it tells us here, there was no auxiliary file, so in the first pass I don't know what to do with this, but I'll take a note and create the auxiliary file. So if I zoom out here, and you see there again, there were undefined references, and also LaTeX tell us what to do. LaTeX tells us, okay, I couldn't find an auxiliary file, so I go ahead and create auxiliary and take a note of what needs to be done in your document. And it says labels may have changed, because now LaTeX tells us, now I took a note of the fact that there is a label and a reference to that label in your text document. Rerun to get cross references right. So LaTeX says that now the auxiliary file is there, I've taken a note, and if you run me again on this text file, I just go ahead and read the auxiliary file one line at a time and execute those. As you can see, for example, in tutorial 4 there was no let's look at the auxiliary file. See, it was just relax gdef. This is the page numbering, so we only have one page. Is the last page is number 1, that's fine. But now we have a new command or a new note in the auxiliary file, and says create a new label, equation 1, search for this label in the text file and number it, and the numbering starts from 1, and the number that corresponds to this label is number 1. So if I have and later on if I add more than one equation, we'll see how this node changes, right? So this is just a node that PDF LaTeX took, and it tells us what to do. So if I look at the PDF, you see this reference has not been handled by PDF LaTeX because there was no auxiliary file when we originally run the PDF LaTeX on a text file. So LaTeX didn't know what to do, but it took a note, and now if we run it another time, LaTeX calls a command line tool that basically handles these citations, right? So LaTeX already tells us what to do. There is a label that needs to be, you need to run the PDF LaTeX again to get the cross references right. So let's do it. So if now I run the PDF LaTeX on tutorial 5 again, now as you can see, LaTeX is not giving us any warning again, right? So in this part, everything goes as planned, and because there is auxiliary file, so LaTeX knows that you haven't changed anything inside this text file, so it doesn't bother to go through your text file again. It just immediately goes to the auxiliary file and executes all the lines. And if I look at my PDF, now the referencing is right? Equation 1, and the equation is numbered. And again, LaTeX took a note of what needs to be done, and the thing that needed to be done was adding a label for this particular label, equation 1, and the style of label is numbering. It starts from 1, and the number that is corresponding to this label is number 1. All right. Now let's try to clean this up. And I'm going to add another equation before this, and the other one is this, right? So as you can see, now we have two equations. So let's see what kind of note LaTeX takes in the auxiliary file for this one that we're creating a reference. Note that this says equation 1, but it doesn't matter because this is just a label. I can just write blah blah blah. This is just a piece of text, and LaTeX doesn't care because LaTeX automatically takes care of figuring out what the numbering is going to be. So label is something for us to later on be able to reference it, and that's a very powerful thing. So I'm just still going to set it to equation 1, but now this equation 1, actually the numbering is 2 because this is the first equation and this is the second equation. So PDF LaTeX tutorial 5. And again, the same story here. There were undefined references, and LaTeX says equation 1 are undefined, okay, and it says I couldn't find any auxiliary file, so I'm just going to create auxiliary file, but rerun the PDF LaTeX again to get cross references right. So if you look at the PDF, as you can see, the equations are correctly numbered, but again, the cross referencing or the citation of this equation is not correct. Now if we rerun this, and let's look at the auxiliary file, and now you see there are two notes on the equations, which tells LaTeX we need to actually create two labels, basically one for equation 1. And if it first says, okay, there was this one, but now the equation numbering has changed, so this equation 1 corresponds to number 2, starting from number 1, right? So equation numbering starts from number 1, and this label now corresponds to number 2, and LaTeX disregards the original one, the original node, and then just executes the newest one, which is 1. So let's delete this and run PDF LaTeX one more time. All right, let's refresh this. An auxiliary file, and again you see there are two commands that are associated with this one, and LaTeX always executes the newest one. So this equation 1 label must correspond to number 2, and with a numbering that starts from 1, something like that. So if I run PDF LaTeX one more time, it goes ahead and handles everything, and now numbering is correct in my PDF. So equation 2 beta, we are referencing this number 2 equation, and again that's very nice because the numbering is handled behind the scenes. All we have to do, we have to define a label, right, to our environment, and with that we can reference to this environment anywhere in our LaTeX document, and LaTeX automatically takes care of the correcting the numbering if we add more stuff, more equations to it. So I hope you enjoyed this lecture, and I hope this concept is very clear to you about the why we need to run LaTeX or PDF LaTeX, any type of LaTeX typesetter, why we need to run it more than one time. Please stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next one.